There are Brett IPAs popping up all over the place, and I'm happy about it. And tonight's review is one that I've had before on tap. It's Kent Falls. This isn't even my final form, which I think must be a reference to how Brett IPAs will change quite a bit if you age them a few months, because the hops will fade quite a bit, and the brettanomyces will get funkier, even though with this one they say drink fresh. Yeah, most Brett IPAs, in my opinion, are best when they're pretty fresh, especially if the IPA part is strong, because aged bitterness and old hop is not that great. But brettanomyces does help prevent extreme oxidation. That makes it so it doesn't get disgusting. Like a year-old Brett IPA is going to be way better than a year-old regular IPA fermented with good old Saccharomyces rather than brettanomyces. So this one is it's brewed with Apollo and Columbus hops, and I don't know what Brett strains at all. When I had it on tap, it seemed extremely funky, but more of a funky hop thing. It was like crazy garlicky, dank, sweaty sort of hops going on, and maybe that was brought out by some funky Brett, but I was not noticing too many of the hallmark characters of Brett strains I'm familiar with. I'm sure there are a lot of Brett strains out there that I haven't had so many times, but they didn't tell me with this one. And I don't know the age of this either. It doesn't say anywhere on there the age was, but they have been switching up the bottle colors and such. So I don't know if the blue label is the fresher one. And it's 6% alcohol, so pretty standard. But my friend said, yeah, she's had this a couple times, and every time it's been real different, and it's very carbonated. Because the last time I had it, it wasn't my favorite, but maybe I'll like it more now. Ooh, and there goes the fire truck. Yeah, pretty darn carbonated. Head looks pretty nice. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, it's very dank in the aroma. It reminds me of the last time I had it, except there's a little bit more of a fruity sweetness happening. Yeah, it's got a touch of a sweet tart Smarties thing going on that I think is from the brettanomyces. Yeah, this is a really interesting beer, because the funk, I think, in this beer is especially coming from the hopping, and the fruit is coming from the brettanomyces. Maybe someone can prove me wrong, but that's what my nose is picking up, especially. And the head's a good combination of thick bubbles and light bubbles. It's dying down a little bit. Has a light haze, but there's a good amount of sediment on the bottom of this. But it's stuck really well to the bottom. This doesn't smell old to me at all. And I know that most Kent Falls bottles don't stick around the shelves too much around here, because they're somewhat rare and not many liquor stores can get shipments of them. And the carbonation looks pretty good. It's not as intense as you might think it would be for a beer that accumulated so much head. But yeah, it's dank. It's got some lemony, piney things slightly, but it's more like a sweaty, garlicky, herbal thing. But it's not overly vegetal, like with asparagus sort of notes or dill, like I get from certain beers that use really vegetally yeasts, the yeasts that bring out vegetal qualities from the hops. Yeah, it smells like it's gonna be very nice. Whew. But yeah, quite bitter and chalky on the tongue. And I get a lot more of the medicinal phenols and chalkiness from the Brett on the tongue, actually. And now that Brett is coming out pretty strong now. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Crooked Stave Brett IPA that I had. That one was pretty big on the piney hops. This one's not as much on those, but it's a little harsh on the tongue. Really dry, really dries out the mouth, gives you kind of cat tongue, chalky sort of thing. Yeah, feels very tannic. And the aroma made it seem like it was going to be a little bit softer. It's a cool beer though. It's got a good amount of sweetness, it seems, still. It's got the sort of fruit cup, tropical sweetness happening at the same time as plenty of grassy, piney, bitter lemon, and like aspirin sort of roughness to it. Let me pour a little bit more in there. See if I can get some extra yeast, if that changes things up. You can see it's got pretty medium carbonation, but the head looks well. It's a very well brewed beer, because these Brett IPAs, you kind of never know what you're going to get when you open one up. This is put together pretty well in my opinion. I think I like the aroma more than I like the flavor, especially the feel. It just is full of hop oils and aspirin-y texture. It's not quite airy and fluffy on the tongue, but it has a prickly carbonation. It keeps the body pretty light, even though there is some sticky sweetness to it. And yeah, the bitterness, the combination of the bitterness and the drying Brett medicinal qualities is a little much for me. It's not my favorite. It's not super pleasant, but that's not always why I'm looking to drink beers. It's something that's just normal and easy, and you don't have to think about it when it's in your mouth. This is why Brett IPAs are exciting. It's trying to figure out what exactly is going on. This is a really complex beer, and it's definitely well done. But it's definitely not for everyone. It's not going to be your juicy beer experience very much. It's going to pack a good, like old-fashioned hoppy punch of dankness, bitterness, and citrus. But then that drying, chalky brettanomyces just kind of ups the dryness in the finish that some IPA drinkers might not like. Yeah, the reviews are kind of all over the place for this beer, but I think it's pretty good. I'll give it an 80, 82, something around there. Because I'm not sure if I would buy this again anytime soon. Unless maybe I could be sure I get it super fresh, or maybe it would be interesting to age this slightly and see if the bitterness could go down a little bit before the hops start going downhill. But the aroma is really interesting. I'll give it, yeah, probably 82 for that awesome aroma. And if they just tone down the hoppy bitterness maybe a touch with this beer, not as much bittering hops, it would be right at my alley. It's like really close to being an outstanding beer for me. So we'll do, yeah, 82 bags of popcorn for, this isn't even my final four. It's later.